The first men to be created and formed were called the sorcerer of fatal laughter, the sorcerer of night, unkempt, and the black sorcerer. They were endowed with intelligence. They succeeded in knowing all that there is in the world. When they looked, instantly, they saw all that is around them, and they contemplated in turn the arc of heaven and the round face of the earth. Then the Creator said, "They know all. What shall we do with them now? Let their sight reach only to that which is near. Let them see only a little of the face of the earth. Are they not by nature simple creatures of our making? Must they also be gods?" The Pope of all. Welcome to this week's episode of Warfare, Advancement, and Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I'm your host. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me this week. If you're a newcomer, welcome. I hope you will peruse our backlog of episodes, and if you're a returning listener, thank you guys. As always, your support means a lot. So this week, we will be discussing kind of the central part of what is today Mexico, as well as further south into the Yucatan and other parts of Mesoamerica, Central America, those regions. And that's between the years of 6 and 4000 BC, BCE, whichever of those two you prefer. But before that, there is one thing I did want to discuss. It's a new article, brand new, just came out on the 19th. So it is, and it is relevant to kind of what we've been discussing and what we will be discussing for these next few weeks as we finish up the Americas. And it has to do with dating and some of the issues with dating, and it does concern a period prior to this season, but we've touched on this topic in the past, and I feel like it's a good thing to kind of talk about some of these sites that I think is very relevant still to what we've been discussing. And the article appeared in Science, and it is entitled "A Mid-Holocene Age for Monteverde Challenges the Timeline of Human Colonization of South America," and it was authored by, I believe, 6 individuals, Todd A. Suravel et al., including Cesar Mendez, Juan Luis Garcia, Christopher Luthgens, and Claudio Latour, and there's another author, but their information will not pull up on my screen, so apologies for that, whoever that 6th author is. I'm not trying to slight you, blame Science's poor web design. Now, we discussed several episodes ago, I think it was all the way back in Season 2, and we touched on it again in Season 3 when we were discussing the Americas, that when it comes to the peopling of Americas, there's a lot of controversy about which is the oldest site in the Americas, when did people arrive where, and for a long time it was thought that the Folsom first tradition of the North Americas was, kind of the correct interpretation of the evidence. However, since then there have been several sites in other parts of North America, as well as South America, that really threw, fuel on the fire of, there being other earlier sites. And I mentioned last season how it's probably likely a lot of these sites may now be underwater due to the rising sea levels, especially on the Pacific coast. If people were, rowing down or, sailing down or canoeing down the coastlines of America. And one of the sites that kind of threw the Folsom first tradition on its head was Monteverde in what is now Chile. There had been evidence, saying that this could have been occupied around 14,000, 15,000 years ago. Now, when it comes to Monteverde and several other sites in South America, they've done limited archaeological studies of those sites, and there haven't really been large, systemic, stratified studies of those areas. And some of that is because those sites where they are environmentally speaking, stratification is kind of hard to judge. Well, Monteverde, they have gone there and discovered that site is not 14 to 15,000 years old. It's actually much more recent. It's probably around 6,200, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So this would put it well after Folsom. Now, again, that is not to say that there are not older sites in Folsom in South America, or that Folsom is first. However, it is interesting that one of these first big surveys at one of these supposedly very old sites in South America has been pushed back, or pushed more recently than the Folsom. So some of these other sites in South America, when they become studied, may run into similar issues. That's not to say they will, and that's not to say that there are not older sites, other places that have not been discovered yet. It's just one that has been overturned, and quite dramatically. I mean, we're talking like a 6,000-7,000 year difference of timing, and that's more recent to us. So, just wanted to mention that. Thought it was important. I will try and remember to put the link in the episode description if you guys want to read about how the site was dated and some of the things about it. But it is an interesting read, but it's really not too relevant, and there's a lot of just talk about an area we're not going to get to just yet. So just wanted to put that out there, acknowledge it, because it was a big article, and it kind of does, not necessarily reinforce the Folsom first, but it does kind of throw some water on some of the wilder claims about how old human occupation of South America is. But again, it's not saying that there's not older occupations, and I think there are. I think there's enough evidence to say that there is older occupations at these other places, but as they get studied, those may get moved forward a little. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, on to the primary purpose of this episode, and that is to discuss human developments in what is now kind of central to southern Mexico / moving into Central America. Now, we talked about it last season when we got here, but they have begun to experiment, or not really experiment, but they have begun to practice that incipient agriculture / early horticulture that we've seen in other parts of the world. And what they are beginning to practice this with includes cucubrita, which are squash. Apologies for the pause there. I had ambulances rolling down the street. But cucubrita / squash, bottle gourds, things like that. They were also beginning to work with wild teosinte, which is the ancestor of modern maize or corn, as well as beans. Though bean domestication in this region will take a little bit longer. But this is, of course, the basis of all Native American agriculture, both in northern and, to a certain extent, South America as well. Like the Three Daughters is a term used to describe growing these crops together. Now, these are not the only crops that are being domesticated or that will be domesticated in the region. Those are just the ones that spread further to other parts of North America, and again to South America as well. They're also potentially starting to domesticate chili, various types of chili peppers, though I think there's more evidence that does start kind of in next season's time frame. There is also yucca, various types of cacti like the prickly pear, agave, things like that. Though how domesticated those are. Some of those are wild plants, but there's, there could be reason to suspect that they were intentionally spread because hunting and gathering, mobile hunting and gathering, do still take up a large. Well, they don't take up. That's not the best way to put it. But a large portion of the population, even as they're beginning to practice agriculture, they are still moving seasonally or semi-seasonally or semi-annually, depending on the environment. They are moving around, so if they're spreading these early domesticated or various versions of these semi-wild crops, why couldn't they spread certain other types of trees or plants, even if they're not what we would consider, domesticated? But we'll get into that more later. And of course, that's not even talking about wild trees with various types of fruits or nuts. All of that is part of the diet and the economy in this region. And some of these plants are also present further north in that term I used last week, Aridomerica, which just to kind of confirm this, and I mentioned it prior, there is overlap with some of those material cultures that we talked about the last couple of weeks with kind of the northern parts of Mexico, which is more arid, much less lush and tropical than the region we're moving into now. And even in this more lush region, it's important to remember that is to an extent seasonal, at least when you're talking outside of the various river valleys. There is a wet season, and then there are drier seasons as well. Now, there are two valleys, two river valleys that are very important to the development of agriculture in this region, and that is one we touched on last season. It's the Tehuacán Valley. We discussed the start of the El Rigo phase, and we'll continue with that on here shortly. But the other valley that this is beginning to develop is the Oaxaca Valley. Now, the Tehuacán Valley is a little bit drier. It's right within kind of like the rain shadow of the nearby mountains, so it doesn't get as much rain as Oaxaca. And today, this valley it's a pretty wide area. It's about 3,800 square miles and about 9,800 square kilometers. Apologies again for the cut, more sirens. But yeah, so it's a very wide geographic area. Today it is kind of split between three Mexican states, the state of Oaxaca, Pueblo, and Tlaxcala. And in that valley, there's a lot of agave, hechita, salvia, and cacti. Then, of course, it's bounded on, I think, all sides by various types of forests. There's a lot of different pine forests, oaks, and then they have some dry forests on one side as well. But it's a fairly, actually, in terms of climate, if you didn't have the tropical plants there, it would be very similar to some of the drier parts of the Mediterranean coast, kind of near like where the Levant is. Now, to the south of that region, you have the Oaxaca Valley, or is known in Spanish as the Valles Centrales, or the Central Valleys, which technically, yes, it is a couple of smaller valleys, but it's all kind of grouped together. It's not quite as large of an area. It's only about 2,800 square miles and about 7,200 square kilometers. And both of these valleys contain archaeological sites that date to this period. And these sites actually, because of their climate, they actually do a very good job of showing how the plants were evolving over time. We actually have a really good sample of kind of this early maize domesticants, showing how they are slowly evolving into closer to the modern varieties of corn that we're more familiar with. And it is at the sites in the Tehuacán Valley, which is associated with the El Rego phase. That's really just used to describe life in the Tehuacán Valley. And this date, the dates on this are a little bit challenged. Some put it as early as 8,600. Some put it as late as 6,800 as the starting point. And then you have a different end date. If you go with the earlier date of 8,600, the end date for the Riego phase is 5,700. If you go with the 6,800 time frame, it can go to as late as 5,000 BC. Now, that is not to say that the habitation stopped after that. It continues on very much. But again, this is that specific phase's dates. And one of the sites associated with that phase is the Coxcatlan phase. The Coxcatlan cave. Now, this was not a permanent settlement. This is one of those seasonal camping grounds we've discussed in the past with other hunter-gatherer groups. But essentially, this was a place that during the dry season, which we've talked about how hunter-gatherers would typically live in small family units, and then during winter or times where the food may not be as abundant, several somehow related bands would come together and kind of pull resources and work together to more easily extract food and things like that. And for this region, there's not really a winter. There's the dry and the wet phase, and they would come here during the wet season to reestablish familial ties, things like that. So this would be one of those macro band sites. Exchange sons and daughters between various bands as needed, and then once the wet season ended in the region, of course, it becomes dry in the valley, and they would leave in the smaller bands again to go to wherever the animals they were following were migrating to. So they would split in several directions and go from there. This would also be a time to exchange gifts or goods for trade. A lot of obsidian points have been found in the area, scrapers, things like that. You also begin to see kind of a wider variety of projectile points and bladelets and things like that. Probably as they're changing what they're hunting, they are having to develop different types of points to hunt different types of animals. Also during this period, they found a lot of different wood tools, things for weaving baskets and other objects. So no ceramics just yet for this period at this site, but it will be coming sooner rather than later to this region. And again, they are finding some early semi-domesticated strains of some plants, again, beans, maize, as well as still very wild or mostly wild varieties of things like avocado and other fruits and nuts. Now, in the Oaxaca Valley, there is another cave site. This is the Guilanaquitza cave in, again, what is now the state of Oaxaca. And again, this is a little further south. And this is another good place to really show early evidence of semi-domesticated crops. They found a lot of maize, cucumbers, and beans here, though the beans, again, dated to a little bit later period. It is one of the earliest sites in the Americas where you see those three crops together. Now, they were probably not being grown in the region, or if they were, they weren't being grown in very large numbers. The topsoil here there's really not a whole lot of good land to kind of level and plant in, so that they were probably bringing it to the area when they were traveling for the seasonal migrations, following the animals they were hunting. But they do kind of see this early evidence of where the corn was starting to develop the cob, though it's not close to the cob at this period. It's just a longer body. The kernels were also more closely attached to the cob itself, and the kernels were beginning to become less hard to break open, or to crush or to grind. A lot of the early maize, the kernels are they kind of distend from the body of the plant, and while you could easily pull those off, they were a little bit harder to grind up or to break into to get to the the nutritious part of the plant. Now, as time goes on, you begin to grow larger cobs with more kernels on them, and the kernels are hard to break away from the cob itself. But once you get them off, they're easier to grind or to just eat without breaking a tooth necessarily. And that's probably something, make it harder for birds or mice or what have you to pull the kernels away from the cob. They could still do it, but it's not as easy. You might have more time to chase them off or what have you. Also, wild teosinte has spikelets kind of on the top and bottom of them that could, stab you or prick you, and those of course go away or become smaller and softer as time went on. And again, there are other items that appear to have come from further away, like the remains of the semi-domesticated crops. Stone from other places. There's a lot of evidence of obsidian trade, things like that. Now, I didn't see anything mentioned about any kind of burials at any of these sites or human remains, or at least the sites in Oaxaca. There has been evidence of human remains at Coxcotlan, and this is debated, but there is supposedly potential evidence for perhaps early examples of human sacrifice. Though again, that's debated and still being discussed by archaeologists and in the region. Excuse me. Now, both of these valleys will eventually see nearby settlements at a somewhat larger scale, though early permanent settlements here do not really show up. Most of the early permanent settlements showing up in Mexico are along the Gulf of Mexico, bordering the Caribbean Sea, and those are almost all coastal. But these are very, very small, and they're only popping up right around 4000 BC, so right at the end of this season's time frame. And with how the environment is, that's not too surprising. Again, there will eventually be settlements here in the classical period. Some of them get fairly large, but with the available technology and the more reliance on hunting, it's not really feasible to build large cities or larger settlements, not necessarily cities, until later periods. But again, we'll get to that later. Now, also should talk about where this maize did come from if it wasn't local. Now, again, there is wild teosinte in the area, but based on the genetics and the pollen levels at these sites, it's shown that they're grown a little bit further to the west. And this is the Balsas River Valley. although it's not really a valley. I think it's just the Balsas River basin region. That is where this initial form of domesticated maize originated. And there is evidence that they were also probably semi-sedentary, though there is debate about that. Some people think that this is actually the region where the first permanent settlements popped up in Mexico, or what is now Mexico. But that is a little debated, again, because that valley does run, or that river does run right to the north of both the Oaxaca, and it does kind of come from parts of the Tehuacán Valley, though, again, a little bit debated, but there's definitely a long history of agriculture on that river. So it's probably a mix between the two, at least in terms of what's the first settlement, or the first permanent settlements. But that river, the Balsas, will also become a site of permanent settlement as well. Now, there's also the possibility that some of these earlier sites are buried underneath classical cities in Mexico, places that would eventually be not eventually be overtaken. That's probably not the right word, but that would be built over by the various classical civilizations of the Americas. The Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the other Aztec neighbors, of which there are a lot, and we'll get into that much later. But so it's possible that there are older settlements that are just under these classical sites that just have not been excavated because people don't want to completely destroy the classical cities to see what's under them. But obviously there are ways around that. And who knows, maybe one day they will find out, oh yeah, these cities were built over these older settled sites that could go back further than we think. But that's all stuff we'll have to wait and see about. Now, I haven't seen it mentioned too much explicitly in the literature, but fishing was also a big part of the economies here. There is evidence of shell middens and things like that near several rivers. There's a lot of salt lakes in this region of Mexico, so fish would have been available there, as well as shellfish and things like that. So that is also something that they're supplementing their diets with. And looking at the clock here, we're about at 30 minutes. So I think this is actually a good place to stop for this week. We will be back not next week because that is Easter, and I'm taking an extra day for travel for that, so apologies, but I will be having a week off, but we'll be back the following week. We'll be moving into what is now Central America. Not a whole lot of specifics to get into there, but there are a couple of sites. Also, we will talk about how probably Peach Bull from Central America at the end of the season will become the first people to get to the Caribbean islands, or at least a couple of the Caribbean islands. And there are other ways of migrations later, but that's all for future stuff. But that is something that we will be exploring over the next episode or two. And then once that's done, we will begin our overview of South America for this season. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. But we are almost done with Season 4. It's hard to believe. I can't imagine it'll be more than 5 or 6 episodes left in this season. And it's been a long one. But I will be kind of reworking how we organize things, because we are getting to a point in time where we will have actual written documentation of at least some items. We'll still, of course, be relying heavily on archaeology for a number of things, but we'll have more myths to go over and things like that. But we'll dive more into how we're going to reorganize in future episodes here. But I hope you've all enjoyed. If you have any questions, comments, constructive criticism, please let me know. You can reach me at waradrevpod@gmail.com. You can also contact me via direct message on X/Twitter. You can also contact me on YouTube via YouTube comments. And supposedly YouTube's bringing back direct messages. I've heard that rumor, but that would be nice. It'd be a good way to communicate with people, because some people are nervous about leaving comments. They think I'm going to jump down their throat on something, and I definitely don't do that unless someone's just being really rude. But I haven't had to do that on YouTube, except for the guy telling me that ancient Egyptian used the same word for person that they did in some Bantu language, and I'm like, that's not the word the ancient Egyptian used for person at all. Here's the link, and then I never heard from them again. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But please feel free to drop me a line. As always, just be respectful, and I'll be respectful. And we can agree to disagree about anything. That's not a problem. I have no qualms about that. But I do thank you for your time and your listening to the show. And please feel free to like, rate, 5 stars, download, all that kind of good stuff. Check me out on YouTube if you haven't already. Probably no pictures in this week's episode. There's not a whole lot to go on specific examples. Most of the pictures I can find relating to this time and that place, they were taken in the 60s. So the pictures are not exactly clear. And a lot of museums, they're kind of picky about what pictures they'll put online because they want you to go in and see them, which I don't blame them. You got to keep the lights on, especially, some governments don't provide, I really don't think any government provides enough funding to their history and museums and things like that, but obviously cost benefit, you have to make your cuts where you can, and unfortunately history, archaeology, all that kind of stuff is usually on the chopping block. So it is what it is. But again, thank you all. I hope you have a good rest of your day and or week from when you listen to this, and I will see you all next time. Peace.